Welcome to episode 14 of the Light Her Project podcast. Real women.
Real talk.
I'm Rachel Strella.
And I'm Vixen Divine.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today's topic is navigating gender disparities in the workplace. We are very excited to welcome a guest, Miss Jess Boozel. And Jess is a marketing professional at Strella Social Media. So we're going to dive right into the topic. So let's roll. First question. Have you ever felt assumptions were made about you in the workplace because you were a woman? And what were those assumptions?
Yeah, I worked at Tractor Supply for a year and a half while I was in college. And while I didn't feel assumptions made about me from my team members, because it was mostly for Indians, I did feel assumptions from the customers. There were some comments made towards me about me not being strong. And they were always shocked whenever I would know how to work the forklift or do propane. They would be so shocked when I walked out the door and I was the one doing the propane. They just, I guess, weren't used to it. But I just felt like some of the comments that they made hurt me because I felt like they were thinking less of me as a woman.
Okay, I can see that. No, the fact that you were able to do it in the first place, hey, compliments to you. Okay, first off. But so these assumptions that are made for us in the workplace as women, um, they can be anything from you're stupid or you just don't know. Like they just like you're just everyone's an airhead. We're all an airhead and we should all not be here because don't we have dinner to make or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Something else to do besides be there. So that's where that assertiveness comes in, where you have to, yes, this is my position. Yes, this is what I do. And your demeanor almost has to change sometimes to be stern enough to, that nicety sometimes goes away real fast. And it's not until you get that stern and like this, I mean business, till they take you for such.
Wow, that's actually a really good point. But, for me, it's hard to tell if there were any assumptions that were made unless they were self imposed. I mean, there are times when I feel like I wasn't welcome at the table. Like I may have had a seat, but only in name. I didn't feel like it was in practice, like for me to have a voice.
Okay, understood.
So while we're talking about that, what role do you believe that imposter syndrome may have played in being a female in a male dominated field? And for me, similar to what I said earlier, I think it can be intimidating being a female in the business world. Sometimes, though, I feel like I projected beliefs that may not have been there. But my opinion's a little different than most. I work predominantly like in an online environment, and that's what I've done for 15 years. And I feel like the rules are just different online than when you're working in a face-to-face environment.
Well, when you're in, as far as imposter syndrome goes in this type of thing, um, do you ever feel like that even though you're online, you have face to face meetings, or I should say Zoom type of meetings? Do you get that vibe then?
I mean, if I do, I think it's more because I am not there and I'm not part of their culture. So I could be perceiving things that may or may not be there because I'm not there. Like I may feel like, oh, well, they can do all this because I'm just outsourced, but not
Oh,
necessarily anything to do with gender per se.
okay, okay, I got you, I got you. Because of your position, not necessarily because of what you are, woman or man. Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. As for imposter syndrome, feeling that way, being played, I have played the man card because of my name. Like If I suspect that something's going to happen, or if I don't know what's going to happen, I will sign my name as Vic instead of Vixen. First of all, they don't know who Vixen is anyway, but um, I will put VIX and say Vix, so they don't know who it is until they meet me, and so that's how I get away with that. If I feel like I'm gonna feel any kind of twinge, but by the time I walk to the table, then all bets are off because I'm very serious. I can be quite dominant and quite like, don't mess with me. But there's no assumptions made, and don't get that look on your face because I'm gonna get that smile off your face. It's not gonna happen.
For me, I never really felt imposter syndrome, if I can say
I know it's weird.
it. um, for me, I think if I experienced the assumptions whenever I was younger, it would have affected me differently. But because I was like 20 whenever I started it, and then 22 whenever I left, I felt like I was very confident about who I was and who I was as a woman. So their comments and everything that they said about me not really being a man and not doing the same thing as a man didn't affect me as much as it might have whenever I didn't know myself. Because I was like, okay, whatever, that's your opinion. Might
Nice.
not be the right opinion, but it's one.
I applaud you for having that stance. I really do. Not many people can have that. I like that. That'll take you very, very far in life. That will. That will. I think that's good.
Look at
Okay.
that. All right. So let's talk about what it's like working in a male dominated versus female dominated workspace.
Mm.
For me, I've worked with men before I worked at Tractor Supply, everything. And my manager at Tractor Supply was a woman, and then my boss now is a woman, Rachel. I have felt like working with women, there's a lot more communication. I feel like with men, it's a lot of here's what you need, go and do it, figure it out. With women, it's a lot more teamwork and doing it together.
Okay. Okay. I like that. Um, I'm gonna say the reason that I believe that it happens is because women just naturally have a nurturing type of, well, most if you have any kid maybe, but most women have a nurturing component to them. So until they are hardened, because there's that part of the woman who then has been in the work environment and understands it and is like not taking nobody's business. They're not being soft on you, nothing, because they're already through that. But some women remain soft. They remain having that component of compassion, whereas in a motherly type of fashion, as opposed to not having that. So when you do have that, even in a work environment, they could possibly, see what you're going through, take you aside. Maybe you had a bad day, take you aside, kind of give you that motherly kind of thing. Whereas a man generally won't do that. And it's actually more of a relaxed environment knowing that you're cared for. And a lot of times I find that a man they just don't have it. They just don't have that care. It's about business. And but in business even, there's a nurturing component because you're actually a human. And a lot of people tend to forget that.
I could see that totally, and I've had similar experiences, but I have to say, before I started my business, when I was working in places that were dominated primarily by women, there was just a lot of cattiness.
Okay.
I think it's much better when you have a good balance of men and women from my experience in other workplaces. However, in my own business, the majority of my team are made up of women, And in the experience in my business, I found that sometimes it's less about gender and more about finding the right personalities to work with. Everyone in my team must be in alignment with our core values in their role. And so I'm lucky to run my own show and build my own team. Um, but I'll say that in my interactions with clients and colleagues, I found that I do have the most difficulty with men. And I think it's because social media is a field that's not black and white. There are a lot of intangibles. And I find that women are better at embracing those intangible outcomes than men.
So their flexibility doesn't seem to be there as opposed to the woman's flexibility. In that cattiness that you're talking about for that female, dominated environment, yes, indeed, that component can actually be there and be there a lot. But I think that a lot of times that comes with the allowance of that environment. Sometimes when, like, kind of what you said, in the fact that they have to follow a certain vibe, they have to have a certain kind of some when they hire people, they don't necessarily look at that. They're looking at qualifications. Yes, you're qualified for the job, et cetera, et cetera. But that baggage that you're bringing with you to work, they don't necessarily enforce that you have to leave it at the door.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And some jobs do. Jess, did you find that to be the case? Did you find that there was any policy in your Tractor Supply job that like made you leave it at the door, or bring in only things for your job or anything like that?
Whenever I think about that, I just think about whenever I first joined the team, they were talking about if a robbery or something would happen, that your life means more than Tractor Supply. And I've always kept that with me because my friend, she experienced something at Lowe's that was with a global credit card or something. And it ended up being a scam, and she lost some thousands of dollars, and Lowe's was upset with her for that. So I felt like I had a better comfort with my company because they didn't care what happened after there's people at the door as long as I was safe. So I felt very safe, and that didn't have anything to do with gender. That was just about them as a company taking care of me.
Okay.
Let's talk about pay. Have you ever experienced a pay disparity?
Here's the thing. Pay disparity, the only reason that those happen, I believe, are because people are unaware of what the other person is making. If you're in the same room and in the same role as the person beside you, and if you don't know that the person beside you is making $2 more an hour than you are, just for example, you're going to be all happy, cheery, no problems, right? No problems are there. And where it becomes suspicious, I believe, is when they tell you that you are not allowed to discuss your pay. You ever been in one of those environments? There are companies that tell you you are not allowed to discuss what you make specifically with anybody. And the reason for that, if everyone made the same thing, there would be no issue, right?
Yeah, right.
So that's a big red flag right there. Red flag right here, saying that they're paying different people different things depending on how they feel. So a pay scale, most of the time I've experienced a pay scale, whereas it's black and white. If you have this many years of experience, you've been with the company this long, you do this is how much you make.
Right.
So that was and that is usually very structured. I've been with the larger companies where it's structured and or unionized. And that has been very beneficial. So as far as pay disparities, when I was working for someone, I haven't actually experienced it, and not that I know of, but they were really unionized and on a pay scale. So it was pretty black and white. This this is how much you make.
Mm-hmm. In my case, if I did experience it, I was unaware of it. I not I mean, my husband works for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that the pay scales are black and white. You know, if you have this year many years of service, you're this level of manager or employee. This is what you earn. But all the places I've worked were not like that. It was hush hush about what people made.
Oh,
You know, and,
okay.
and and I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Like, I don't broadcast what everybody makes in my company to the people in my company, and there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, everyone has a different skill level and a different level of expertise. Some of them have come in with their own hourly rate, that is what they earn for their work in their expertise. But I could see how somebody could say, oh, why is she getting paid this much an hour when
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing something similar and I'm getting paid this? Because remember, these are all independent contractors. They're not employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hiring them for their knowledge and expertise. So everyone is going to have a different requirement for what they need to get paid.
Well, I feel like in what you do, people come in, they already have this amount. You could do a pay scale, but there would still be this many years of expertise because everyone comes in with expertise. This many years of expertise, this many years. Like you could do a pay scale like that, but I don't see any need for it. Everybody's good. But I feel like in your business, because you have a little bit of people, like you guys are kind of a family. I've watched you, Jess. You're like a family. And and you guys get along and everybody's good and you give out rewards, which is excellent. And that motivates people. So I feel like as long as everyone's happy and no one is basically starving, and because you all work remotely, you're not in the office. You're not sitting there on, at the coffee machine. So, yeah. So, yeah, I got this new thing last night. How did you afford that? Oh, well, yeah, you're not doing that because people do that. They drive these cars and they're like, how's she affording that car? That kind
You're
of thing.
right.
So
The
you don't have
politics
that.
plays a big role in it, and we eliminate that essentially. I mean, you can chit chat online, but it's not the same thing. It's just not.
Right. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses.
No, everyone's doing their own thing. All right, well, we have one more question. So, what role did your direct manager play in feelings of equality or inequality, and what was the impact if that manager is a woman?
At Tractor Supply again, my manager was a woman, and I have a story. One time, a man walked in, immediately requested for another man to help him, and I said that we didn't have any men there today, and that I could help him if he told me what he wanted. And he just said, "Have your manager meet me back at the customer service desk. Have him meet me back, him." And I said, "Okay." That's all I said. I said, "Okay." And then as he was walking there, we have like a mic. So I called her on the mic and I told her what he had said and that he was expecting a man back there for him, not a woman. She happily went. She answered his question and he still walked out mad because it wasn't what he wanted. The question wasn't what he wanted, and there was a woman. So she was very, lost my thought. She was very fair for us with everything because she was doing it herself.
Hmm.
That's ridiculous, but okay.
Yeah. Um. So for me, like with female supervisors, some were really passive about how they felt, like more passive aggressive, and others were very direct. And I remember one instance with a female boss that I had. She called me into her office and she had an entire page of issues that she had with me, and not just with my work. Okay. So, she had talked to other people throughout the organization. And these were private conversations that were coming up in her list, that I had with other women in the company. And she didn't hold back on even the slightest transgression. Like, she really let me have it. I left there feeling completely floored. I felt like she'd been building a case on me for many months, and I had no idea. So, when I've had issues with male supervisors, they were pretty straightforward, but it wasn't nearly as intrusive. Like, nothing personal came up about conversations. It was just about work. And you could tell that they weren't influenced by other people in the office. There was no politics.
Straightforward, pretty
Yeah.
just straight black and white, black and
Yes.
white. I remember having a feel. Well, she wanted me to have a feeling of inequality. Um, I had a manager, and she was really. I'm sure somewhere else she was very good at what she did. However, she had an issue with me. She literally called me into the office because, ready for this? I said my guest, her skin was dry. Okay, now hold on. She already told me her skin was dry.
You were just repeating.
I was just like literally, like she told me her skin was dry, and I was telling her, so we're at a place where we can take care of this. I'm like, oh, okay, well, we have something for that if you'd like me to add that on, that kind of thing. And so her thing was, though, it was really like she wanted to be the queen, whereas in my opinion, I was the queen here. I had been here for years before you came. Okay. And so I had no qualms, or you were not. I didn't care. I didn't care. I did what I did. That's what I do. I do it well. And when you're called, and I'm like, and I'm looking at her, I'm is do you realize what you did? You know that she said that, right? And she was like, yes. She's like, but it's the way you said it. So it was extremely petty, extremely, extremely petty. And she, it was a power play, really. She, she's the boss. She, she calls the shots, and I'm not having it.
Yeah. I could see that. She's on a power trip. Yep. Been in that situation before too. And not people that were like bosses per se, but clients. Like if they felt like I did something that is not something that they would have done, they feel like they have to come in and override anything that I've done or sabotage it somehow. You know.
Yeah. Not a thing. Not a thing. Not a thing.
Well, let's talk about what we're seeing. We probably only have time for one of these. So this is a couple years old, but it's an interesting story. It was featured in Newsweek, and here's this basic summary of it. A woman was hired as a resume editor for a company with clients in the STEM field, which is like science, technology, all
Mhm.
that. Traditionally a male-oriented field. She was the first female employee of this company, and all the interactions took place online. So they had never actually saw their clients face to face. It was all kind of over email. She said at first she experienced sexism and pay disparity from her colleagues and coworkers, all men. And she said that she soon experienced very similar behavior with the clients who would fight her when she offered suggestions. They would mansplain things rather than consider her advice. They would question it.
Mhm.
So, a man in the company had taken over working with a client from her. That just happens from time to time. They switch off people. And he said, and I quote, "So one day I'm emailing a client back and forth about his resume, and he's just being impossible. Rude, dismissive, ignoring my questions. I was getting sick of his shit when I noticed something. Thanks to our shared inbox, I'd been signing all communications as Nicole. And it was Nicole that he was being rude to, not me. So, realizing this, they decided to spend a week using each other's email signatures. So, they just swapped them out. The outcome? The woman, I quote, said, I had a great week. I'm not going to lie. People were more receptive, taking me more seriously. They assumed I knew what I was doing and I didn't have to prove it to them. The man, I was in hell. Everything I asked or suggested was questioned. Clients I could do in my sleep were condescending. One of them asked if I was single. So, not only could a lot of women relate to this story, which she shared on Twitter and Medium, um, but studies show that gender bias in other arenas are very prevalent in online instructors when they're selecting people they want for the classes, in the tech industry. This is well researched as well. So, wow, what do you guys think of that story?
Although it may be old, I think that it still could be true. If people were to do the same thing today, I'd like to see what would happen. It also made me think of what Vixen said earlier about how she signs off as fic.
Yeah, yeah, because I know um, this, as much equality as we would all love to have in our nice, beautiful world. Um, it does exist, but in minuscule amounts. And it's the bias, and it's a bias that is actually given to you without you even knowing it. We've done better in like advertising, and we've done better in some of the things, the images and the things that we've been putting out. But you know, you walk the runway, most of the girls are still like a coat hanger, you know. They could be swap out for a coat hanger. uh, and when you see a business ad, a lot of times it's still a man. um, and I mean, who are we voting for? There's mostly still men. You know, when women, so many more women in the business world as a whole than there used to be, but the representation is minuscule. So that's what we're dealing with.
I think bias is a really interesting topic all around. I mean, there are so many different types of biases. Like there are over 100 different types of cognitive biases alone. Like we don't realize it because we're blinded. We're just coming in from our experiences and shaping, our expectations. I mean, it really takes a lot of leadership ability to get out of your own way and realize that you're producing a bias in any way. We all do it. To an extent. It's just acknowledging it. I think it's so easy to point out the gender bias or the race bias or the things that are very, easy to navigate and tell the difference. But we bring a lot of biases with us, and we probably don't even realize it.
What do you think, Jess? I'm thinking that maybe I should tell the story I told you earlier.
Yes. It goes a little bit away from gender, but I think it's good.
Okay, so last evening I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Steeler country, as it were. Um, and
I'd
there,
hold that.
I'm holding that. But so I am in a restaurant, and there's a bar on one side and there's tables. So me and my crew were at this table, and there's another crew at a table beside us. And, everyone's talking. And this guy from Jersey comes over and he's like, so, where are you from? And I said, now I'm in Pennsylvania, so Harrisburg is not like a far concept. It's the capital thereof. So I said, oh, I'm from Harrisburg. And I hear him say, I heard him earlier say he was from Jersey. And he looks at me, he's like, oh, I thought you were like from Africa or Haitian or Haitian or something. I'm looking at him like, what makes you think? So I have on my lovely head wrap, right? In a different color, but I have on my lovely head wrap, which I wear all the time. And so, because I have this head wrap on, and I did not have on an African outfit, I will say, I was dressed like I had on like a long sweater or something, like nothing odd. My head wrap matched, but honest to goodness, I kid you not, when he looks at me and he's like, it's like, where are you from? No, where you're really from.
Oh, wow.
So the bias, like he just saw this and
Yeah.
he's like, in his head, he's like, oh, she's not from this country.
Interesting. Huh.
As I told
Okay.
her, I think people need to think before they speak.
Hmm.
But just
I have
something.
a lot that I could say about that, especially as it relates to sports. But I'm gonna hold the phone on that, and we'll do that another time.
Okay, fair enough.
But this has been a great discussion. We're coming to the end of the podcast. I want to thank you, Jess, so much for being here today, and for our audience for tuning in. You can follow the Light Her Project hashtag online. So in the meantime, keep it real. Real women
With real talk.